All right. Happy Friday to everybody that is tuning in for another episode of the Coach's Corner. How are you, lovely gentlemen, tonight?
Great.
I don't know about lovely, but I'm doing good.
We are well. Thorfinn's lovely.
There you go. At least two of the people on the screen are all good.
There we go.
Well, for everybody that is tuning in, feel free to ask questions. Just pop them over in the chat box. I'll keep an eye out for them there and pass them along. Hopefully, we will have time to get to everybody. And if not, our wonderful coaches are amazing at getting back to questions that haven't been answered on this show. So, with that being said, I am going to disappear and hand this off to your grace, to Brannos. It's all
Oh, him again? For God's sakes. All right. Well, welcome back, everybody. I look forward to another great episode. This week, it's going to be the first part of a 3-part series. This week's is coaching, training, teaching, and how to become one. And, really how to help your fighter be great. The key of this episode is to understand a little better what each of those pieces really are and how they interact with your students and how you use that to create what could be, a student that excels. And really what we're going to talk about is students that excel past what you're able to even teach sometimes. And that's the real definition of coach, is somebody willing to take somebody that far and mentor them all the way through that. So tonight we got a great crew. We got Viscount Tristan, Viscount Sagan, and Jarl Thorfinn. We have, of course, Tristan already runs a dojo and has a lot of insight, because a lot of this, even the martial arts community struggles with, because there are going to be some examples tonight in that. But Tristan had a great story on his Facebook today about a student, and I'm hoping he's going to share that. Mm-hmm. And then Sagan, I know there's a number of people that have been watching our episodes, and you've seen how many great folks that he has taught, and and I can guarantee you that there's going to be people that excel past you, but you can still be a great trainer or great coach. And Thorfinn, well, he's just a natural. So, and he's going to go like natural, right? That's why I work so damn hard. But no, he's, obviously tons of experience. I look forward to always hearing the stuff he has to say. And, I think it's a great crew for tonight. So guys, how about we start with, I pulled a couple of bullet points, and let's talk about the teacher-student relationship first, because I think that's where we start. Most of the times. I mean, when the first person comes in, you can be a teacher, right? I mean, would you think you could be a coach with somebody that was brand new?
Maybe we should define the difference. Because this is something we talked about back before we even started these episodes, of identifying like what is the definition difference between a coach, an instructor, and a trainer. And I kind of count instructor like a teacher, so those kind of cross over. But just so everybody's clear on the definitions, maybe we should start there.
Okay, so let's. Here's a great quote that came off of one of these, and that is, as an athlete, everything's about you. As a coach, everything's about your student. Mm-hmm. And I think that's when we talk about a coach, it's that dedication to an individual. So to me, and we'll go through it. So let's define the teacher first. Mm-hmm. To me, the teacher is somebody that's disseminating information, getting people everything from their basics to maybe some pieces that will help even, push a high-end person a little bit farther, or teaches them maybe a shot they know that the other person doesn't, and helps them perfect that. But may not have as much investment or understanding of the person they're working with. Okay. What do you guys have any more addition on that?
I wouldn't really say an addition, maybe just a slight elaboration from maybe a different perspective. And that is, like, for example, judo has got probably one of the best descriptions of the the difference between a coach and a teacher or an instructor. And that is, if you're young and you want to go compete in judo, you will join up and they will teach you a bunch of different techniques, and they're going to find in there, your teacher or your coach is going to find things that you're naturally gravitate to being good at. And they're going to say, all right, this is going to be your ground and this is how you're going to succeed. Let's hone these up and let's maybe add a couple things, but we're not going to give you the entire judo syllabus to learn everything. So that's more what I view as a coach. Now, the alternate is you get somebody who likes judo and wants to come into it. They don't want to compete. They want to learn judo, and they will have an instructor who will say, I'm going to take you through everything that judo does, and you're going to learn a bit of every technique. You might not be really great at any of them, but you'll know all of them, kind of a broad generalist. And to me, that's such a clear delineation of instructor or teacher compared to a coach. And both of them want their student to succeed, but one is hyper specialized in getting the most performance out of their athlete in the shortest amount of time so that they are prepared to compete, versus somebody who just wants to know the body of work.
Perfect. Thorfinn?
Yeah, so I did jujitsu for a long time, and that's exactly the case. Like the weekly classes that you go to would be the instructor, right? Or the teacher role. That guy is going to do this class we're doing, hip throws and this type of rolls, right? But then later on, I started working with one particular guy, and he really assumed the role of like the coach. He was trying to guide me into specific roles, and the other person was just teaching us. Everyone in the class was learning the same thing, right?
Yeah.
And I think that happens at fighter practices too. So you go to fighter practice, and you got that guy who's going to walk over and show that new guy, this is how you throw a flat snap, right? And he's going to show everyone the same thing, right? That's the instructor teacher, right? The coach is going to look at you individually and say like, you, and also maybe they're going to also look at how you learn versus I say these things, you do these things, right?
Yes.
They're going to be more adaptive. So I definitely think that's the case.
Okay. Sagan, you have something?
I do. I tend to look at them similarly to the rest of you, except I look at them as a teacher is into maybe why and what, but not into a lot of how. Okay, so that's like his Grace Thorfinn was just talking about. And then the coach and the trainer are both into why and how. The coach they'll take you on as is, and maybe it's short term. A trainer is about the same thing, and they'll take you on as is with the goal of long term. Right. And that's the way I tend to delineate them. All in all, as Tristan stated in the beginning, all of them want the best outcome possible for their students.
Yeah, I think a big part of that is and that's where this idea of we instructor, teacher. I think when we get into training, now we're talking a little bit more detail on what is good for you and what works for you.
Uh-huh.
Coaching to me tends to fall into that mental mindset. Somebody that can push you beyond your bounds, can pull you off the couch when you need a kick in the butt, pull you out of a bad, what looks like a bad fight, and get you back into a good one. Somebody that knows you. And I think that's why in boxing you see so many fathers being people's coaches, right? Because they know their kids. And in fact, it's a little bit of a problem in boxing. And for a while they were talking about not allowing it. But they know their kids so well that, they get emotionally invested. And I think that's what you see in a coaching end. So
I think you also see boxers that attach to their coach like their coach was their father. And Mike Tyson was a perfect example of that.
Yep.
Yeah, true story.
Yeah.
I mean, even in my fighting experience, my night was basically started off as a kind of instructor and then became my coach. But he was an actual coach. That's what he did. He was a football coach.
Yeah.
It was a natural role for him. And he's a teacher. So,
yeah,
those things for him kind of just all fell into place. And I did end up looking very much like, he was like a father figure to me. I listened to him about everything. So
But and it's kind of funny because that goes into. Oops, sorry.
No, the coach can motivate you in a way that no one else can.
Yep. And you bring that up. It's like you talk about that transition from him being your teacher to your coach, right? Because he learns, you're growing together, and we look at that in a way. Sometimes that we've seen problems with that in the martial arts communities. We've seen problems with that in the SCA communities where, I'm not going to teach you everything because I don't want you to be better than me. Mm-hmm. Right. And that's a lot of times you get that with a teacher, right? Because they're the ones that are supposed to know and you're the ones that's supposed to learn. Right.
Because if you surpass them, then you invalidate their experience. Right.
Exactly.
And instead of them looking at this like the coach who doesn't care about that, they want to see you succeed. And then so that's something that as a student you should look to. You should look for people who are not so ego-minded that they can't be willing to let you surpass them and succeed in your own way. I think that's huge.
It's the
Tristan,
red flag
you see
of
that in the
of a narcissist.
But
who is more invested in their image and reputation than they are of their students.
Right. Or their dojo or whatever, right?
Whatever,
Tristan?
yeah.
I mean, that's a real complex relationship in a dojo, isn't it?
It is. Yeah.
So, I think that the key for people to know is that it's all right that the person that you're teaching or training even can go beyond you, and you're still, don't be afraid, because now he may become your teacher and you may learn more from him, but you're still there for him for that motivation. And he's still going to be like, I think this shot will work perfectly for you. Let's go over to, Duke, whoever, and we'll talk about, like, get him to show you this shot. Or, hey, I got a couple of fights for you of guys I know. Let's go over there, and then we're going to bring you through that, and we're going to get some education out of this. Mm-hmm. So he doesn't have to beat you, because in fact, you may find that person teaching you, and by the way, most of the times, to tell you the truth, a great athlete doesn't make a great coach because they're spending more time on themselves than coaching.
True.
But you may find that person teaching you still, beats you all the time, but you beat everybody else that beats him, mm-hmm. just because he knows you so well. Right. Which probably means you're still a better fighter than he is at that point, but he still has stuff to teach you and help you with. And maybe the day he can't tell you, show you a new technique or something isn't the day you throw him away. It's a day both of you understand you got a different relationship.
Right.
I saw this echoed between the SCA and in the martial arts world, because I've run across a number of narcissistic instructors who, as soon as somebody started to be good enough to challenge their perceived authority among newer students, they would find a way to kind of say, well, go out and leave, or something would happen and they would part ways. And I felt that there was an attitude, there's a wrong attitude that created that. So I'm like, well, if that's the wrong attitude, what's the right attitude? And this is something that I found within the SCA kind of by happenstance, but I've really felt that it was the right thing. And it helped me as an instructor not be drawn into, this is my dojo, I got to be Mr. Big Shot, nobody can be better than me. And that attitude was, I want my students to get to the point where I am learning from watching them, and I'm learning from them telling me what they've discovered about the art, not what I just told them and echoing it back. But whether they work with another instructor, they go study at another dojo or at a seminar or anything, and I'll tell them, go steal everything you can, and you bring it back to me. Like, let's work on it and let's make it not just yours, but ours. Because that rising tide raises all the boats, and you get that. I think Sean talked about that. What was it? The talent hotbed.
Yep.
When you have that, you have a dynamic group that is just soaking up stuff from everywhere. They bring it in, internalize it. They churn over it, probably improve it a little bit. Everybody gets better. You put your own ego and reputation aside to make yourself part of that group, and boy, that's when things really start to pop. And so that's how I found a really good way of looking at it. And students like that. They said, well, okay, you're not Mr. God, and we're all a bunch of peons. We're all in this together. And that's the part of that long-term relationship I think you were talking about, the coach and the student. Like, it's not just we're here for 30 minutes or here for a week. We're long haul relationship.
Right.
Yeah, I think, and I guess, on that point, I mean, obviously that's something to watch for at your practice, and it's actually something to watch for, what we're here is to try to help people understand this so that when they're in that place, they know what to watch for themselves. And one is watch your ego, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're here to really make everybody the best they can be. And if we don't, we'll never be the best we can be.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Right.
And one of the articles I was reading here talks about, what you'll see is teachers stop teaching those who stop spending as much time or really focusing on students that look like they're going to bypass them. So be careful. That's not you. Be careful that some guy that you've been teaching starts winning against you and that you kind of drop him off your list because you think you're done with him. Because you may not be. You haven't created the best fighter yet. There's still more to go. You may just take on a different role, like a mentor role. Right. So that's something to watch. Don't be careful just walking away, say, hey, I'm done. And if that's okay, if you just want to be that instructor who's like, hey, I got you here, now it's all you, that's more than fine. But really, for the benefit of becoming a better sport, you may be able to push that a little bit farther and become that mentor or coaching role and help each other. I mean, this is something that happens between like me and Rongvalder all the time. I'll bring stuff in. I love watching and trying to figure out how new things I can pull into what we do. But then there's times I show Rongvalder and he's doing it far better than I do, because it just works in his style so much better. So maybe it doesn't work for me, but it works for him, which makes him a better fighter and makes him able to do those things I can't do, but then there's other times he's like, hey, warm me up. What am I doing? And then we talk about it and we can kind of rev each other up at any given time and get our minds back into the game. Because I tell you, physical part is one of the easiest parts about our sport, right? That mental part of turning it on, staying focused,
there you go. That's it.
That is, you hear this from lots of people. It's all 90% up here. Well, in the beginning, it's 90% physical because you have to learn those skills.
Yeah, you got to get there first.
Yes, and then you use those skills.
Get there first. Yeah.
So just beware. You can. It's not the end of the road. Don't necessarily just set somebody aside because okay, they're getting good enough. I'm gonna just let them go do their thing at practice, and maybe they become teachers at practice, and we would hope that. But because the second thing that they said that happens a lot is that you don't spend as much time, so they start getting a little dissatisfied because they don't feel like they're getting any more. And in fact, it's very hard for any good fighter at a practice. And Tristan, you can for sure say this, when they don't feel like they're learning anymore, then they're going to go out and find somewhere to learn, which is great. Yeah. But you still can offer them pathways.
Or they're going to quit.
Yeah. And you can still offer them pathways. It's like, hey, let's go to this fight practice. Right? Let's go to this event. Hey, what did you learn at that event? Let's practice that practice. Let you show everybody else what you learned. And that sounds a lot like what you're doing, Tristan.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, when people come in, this is another thing. I know our second episode, we're going to get into the good, I think the good, the bad, and the ugly about the do's and don'ts of teaching and coaching and, mistakes to make. And I think the worst one is ignoring or not paying attention or specifically finding out what a particular student wants to do when they show up. You can easily try to impose, I'm going to make you a great fighter. What if you ask them and you say, I really don't care if I win crown. I just want to go and enjoy fighting and get a little better.
Right.
And you come in with, kind of the what do they call it? The Frankenstein parent that wants their little kid to be the pro baseball player when they're 4 years old and they're out there drilling them. You got to throw harder. You got to throw better. And, you can't do that to anybody that comes in new. that's where that connection starts, I think, between a mentor and a student, or a coach and a student, or even just somebody, if you're at your local practice regularly and new people come in and they're like, hey, can you show me something? What about this? How's this? What is this fighting thing? I'm kind of interested.
So somebody brought up in the comments and I'll throw this out to you guys. Somebody brought up in the comments that they often at times see the opposite. In other words, knights often focus, and I would agree with them personally, focus their time on someone they perceive as has the ability to become really good.
Absolutely.
Right? So
that happens a lot.
Yep. And, I think that's an important question. I mean, what do you guys think about that?
This could be a 1 hour discussion on its own.
I know, right?
Yeah.
I'll jump in and say I think it's a weird thing that we do, right? And I agree with Tristan 100% that if someone doesn't want to do that stuff, or their path is like, hey, I just want to come and hit people with sticks once in a while, I'm okay with that, right? I want them to experience the fighting the way that they get what they expect out of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I also want them to be honest. I want them to say right off the bat, like, hey, I'm not pursuing this knighthood thing, right? And I'll be like, okay, but I can instruct you, and I can, show you how to throw blows, and we can, you go bang around, have a good time. This is your hobby. But when you encounter those guys that are like, hey, I really want to try and excel, maybe you have a different conversation. You maybe say to yourself, okay, well, we can start training you to do these activities to become a significantly better fighter. And that's up to them to first admit that that's their goal, and then also to put the energy into it to allow that to happen. And so I think that's part of it. And it's also, by the way, I think it's okay to just be a teacher. Guys, if you're out there in your role that you feel is best for you is at practices is to be the guy that goes over and shows the new person or any person some technique, that's okay too. You don't have to assume this mentor role. That's going to be an organic experience. I think that's going to happen with that person because it's a two-way road. You can't have a mentor without having the mentee, right? And so that's going to happen organically, and those will happen. So other than that, the other thing I wanted to say was, like, when I grew up, I grew up in a really open culture of fighting, right here, and so people didn't have secret blows or household practices where they didn't, like, we wouldn't teach someone that wasn't in our household or that kind of garbage. And so it always weirds me out when I find out that places have those, and I'm like, if you find yourself trapped in one of those situations, it's okay for you to go to another practice, right? And just don't be involved if it's going to be like a closed mindset. It's okay. The whole thing is we should be teaching each other and working with each other and making our martial art better. And people that are keeping secrets or secret techniques and all that garbage, that's negative stuff. And we should just try to work away from that. I think I just don't like that idea.
I agree 100%. But the hard part on that is sometimes, like, probably even in martial arts school, and and Sagan, we were just talking before all this started about sometimes you do find times to bring in people that are all like-minded. In other words, they want to be the athlete, where sometimes you have a practice where people are going there just to get confidence or get some physical fitness or that kind of thing, but you have a half a dozen people there like, I want to do this to the top end. And so sometimes you can lose those lower guys while you're trying to teach these guys what they want to do. So I think there's a medium place, but that's hard to find, right?
Right. And the deal is, well, at least from my point of view, whether the relationship is teacher, coach, trainer, as we've already spoken about, there's another side to every one of those. And open communication is key to understanding what that relationship is, what its limitations are, and what the goals are. And the more open and honest that communication is in an ongoing manner, both sides understand what's expected, both sides want success, and you move forward based on whatever the goal is. Now, for a teacher, maybe it's, I'm going to read this passage from the Book of Five Rings to you. Okay. right? And maybe that's okay. And then they ask, so what did you get out of it? Well, okay, that's fair.
Yeah.
But when you get onto a coach and a trainer, to me, part of the delineation there is there's an absolute object, physical object lesson, mental object lesson in mind, right? More so with the trainer. Because from my point of view, it was my job when I was working with Thorfinn and all these other guys, right? That the idea was I wasn't just going to give them a physical perspective, I was going to give them the mental perspective of here's how, when you start doing these kinds of things and you center and focus, you'll be able to complete these easier. You'll recognize them faster. And therefore you're working your way towards being a reactionary fighter. So it's one of those things where when you're either the teacher, the coach, or the trainer, understand your role, be communicative, right? Ask, do you understand the words that are coming out of my mouth? But do that before all that happens. You already asked the other side, what is it you're interested in? What is your ultimate goal, right? Now, as a coach, that may be limited, right? As a teacher, you may not offer what's your goal. You are going to produce a product, you are going to produce something, and that's the end of that. But as a trainer, if you're going long term, you really need to work with the trainee and understand how things work, communicate to them. There's two roles. There's the trainer and the trainee, and this is how this works in each of these phases of training that we're going to go through.
Yeah, I'm sure you see that in the dojo quite a bit. How do you deal with, those are there because they're paying their money and they want to get, their physical fitness in and learn a little bit, but never really sold, and those who really want to compete?
Well, that's kind of the beauty of Aikido generally. Since we don't have competition, we don't get a lot of the hardcore competitors, but we do get people who do want to come in and learn to handle themselves well. And that's, every dojo has its own atmosphere, and that's one that's kind of what I wanted from Aikido. So that's some more the atmosphere that I created. Although, and the story that Brannos was talking about early in the episode is related to this young lady who came in and she worked in Japan for quite a while, for a number of years. I think she was over there 3-4 years, and moved back, wanted to sort of get in shape, learn a little bit, do something that was, physically active. And she thought Aikido would be, kind of cool, but it's not like she came in and wanted to become a monster or, a self-defense expert or anything like that. And just last night she told me, and I've been working with her a little under a year, and she unsolicited, she just said, I'm building, there's a self-confidence that this training is giving me that I never expected. I never was anticipating this when I joined, but she's like, I like the experience of, and she's pretty small. I'd say she's probably 5'4", and, she can easily chuck around somebody that's almost 6 feet or my size. She's still learning and whatnot, but it was the confidence that really struck me, as she's like, I didn't even imagine being able to feel confident with somebody on a physical level. And what I saw of her, because she was kind of an introverted personality, sort of quiet, what I see developing in her is something that I'm trying to teach and sort of fan the flame, to use Customato's terminology, is there's a little spark there of assertiveness, and I see it growing like a tree. And in training her to basically be assertive and move into people's space with confidence and take them down, she's taking to it like a duck to water. And it's fantastic. It's marvelous to see that, because it was not part of her personality of what she showed. But when you get on the mat or you get on the field, you can see those things growing, and you plant a seed and it will grow. And so I would say to those people, and I've run into households like that, they're like, I want the top draft picks. Give me the best athletes, the ones who we can go out on a melee field in 6 months, and I can have them, be killers. And they'll look at somebody who's maybe not physically imposing. They don't have any athletic background. They don't have the will to dominate. And they're like, yeah, get out of here. We don't want to bother with you. I was like, I'll tell you, that person who came to you could be a sleeper. They could wind up working much harder and be far more dedicated than the natural will be. Because what I've seen in over 25 years of competitors come and go, the talented naturals tend to disappear. They show up, for 6 months, a year, 2 years, they get good. Then it starts to become work. They hit a ceiling, they hit a plateau. Then they go, why can't I beat the really good guys, regularly? Or why am I not consistent? You say, now we need discipline. You've been surviving so far in athletics. Now you need to work. And they're like, I've never had to work at anything. Why should I have to work? And then they go off and they find skiing or, whatever. They get into something else. Mm-hmm. But that one who comes in that's not a natural talent, and I classify myself in this category. I was not a natural talent, but I was willing to work and work hard and over a long period of time. Those people will outshine the natural talents. So,
yeah, Thorfinn.
I think this falls into what we were talking about, the difference between the coach and the trainer right here, mm-hmm. right? Is that you can see the ember there that needs to be stoked, and where a trainer is just someone who's like, you need to stand like this, or you need to you're not using your hip right. Mm-hmm. Where I think that this is a really cool observation about how a coach can see that spark and also help grow that spark. Mm-hmm. And that's majorly the difference, I think, between an instructor and a coach.
Sure.
So I just wanted to comment I think that's a really great analogy there for you.
Yeah, I agree too. And in some of those cases, Your Excellency, it was probably better that student got moved right along, mm-hmm. right? Because of attitude, pride, however, I will classify it as, because of the negatives, that student moving on was given the opportunity to find a positive. So
the other thing I found in terms of a coach, if I just add on to this, is that those talented naturals usually make horrible instructors and coaches.
Yes, they do.
They're talented. They can land a stick on somebody. But when someone comes along and says, how does this work? Why does it work? Why do you do it? How do you do it? Show me. They're like, I don't know. I just do it. Whereas the person, the more turtle-like person who says, all right, I'm not a talented, but I'm going to work. I'm going to ask questions. I'm going to start to understand. They build an understanding that is far better to describe to somebody else what works than the natural.
Right.
And I think a lot of that comes from people that have had to work, and you got to this point, people that had to work almost through their whole life. That's what they're used to. Yep. They're used to putting in hard work constantly. Mm-hmm. Where those that have a gift, oftentimes once they run up to that top of the gift, and then, that's good enough. And they don't have to put that work in. So they don't have that same ethic sometimes. Right. Now you can, and this is where this is something outside a trainer or teacher's role necessarily. And trainer might cover that a little bit, but this is a mental space that you have to work. You have to get that guy to understand he is not the best and be okay with it. And then stoke that fire of wanting to learn even more and become a better, whatever he's trying to become. But I will say, it's more difficult to get a person that hasn't had, a hard time in life doing something, in other words, hey, I came in, I was a lot that way. I came in from kendo and hapkido, and I was like, sword fighting, no big deal. I'm already doing it. Well, a whole different game, right?
Absolutely.
But I could still beat Dukes back then, right? Every once in a while, there was, and a lot of people could. That game was a lot easier. We didn't have these real honed fundamentals and fighting styles like we do now, and we could see how that's changed. But it was hard. I got to a point where I'd lose against the brand new guy, but I beat a Duke in a tournament, right? Mm-hmm. And it was so random that I was like, finally, I got to a point. He's like, well, you know what? I'm just going to go do melee. Forget this tournament crap. And I was always, it's not like I was the top guy, but I was always pretty good in sports. But there was that case where it's like, I'm good enough, and I didn't put that extra work in until until I got that light bulb moment, and seeing other people do it who weren't my knight, and I didn't really have a coach back then, or weren't my trainer or anything else. I was just watching and
Right.
saw it. And I think actually Duke Quill's on here, and he talked about a higher echelon trainer might need to go get taught by someone who isn't their coach. And I think a good coach actually funnels you to the people that they think will, and we talked about this a little bit before we got on, a good coach will funnel you to the people that you can learn from even more, but also
Absolutely.
in a way that doesn't disturb your current training. In other words, I've seen way too many people, you go to and they're like, oh no, your stance is wrong. All this is wrong. You should change everything.
Yeah.
And I will tell you, if you're in that place, I oftentimes go out and, lots of footwork, lots of this stuff. And it's like, hey, this is what I do. And if you learn, worst case that happens, you learn what I do and how to fight people like me. Right. And then sometimes I'll even take their stuff and then show how the same shot can be thrown from their positions. And so the idea is to try to help them. But, I guarantee you that I'll have people come to our practice and move here. I can't teach them how to fight Atlantean style any better than they probably know now. Right. So, I don't go to Tristan's dojo and say, hey, can you teach me Kung Fu? Right. Yep. So understand, if you move somewhere and you want to stay in the style you're doing, there's going to be people that try to help you with stuff, but you're probably going to have to go out and look and find somebody and find film, or maybe even, work a relationship with somebody still back home if you want to stay in that style. Or you're going to have to go ahead and become, modify that style, to take advantages. And you may find that there's even more advantages modifying it a little bit, because you'll learn how to compete in two different ways. And Count Steiner, in the interview we did, he talked about that exactly. There's certain lines he throws now that really opened him up as a fighter because he had to. So, I think Quill's 100% right. You need to be able to go out and learn from others, and if you don't have a coach, that's absolutely what you have to do. If you're already a great athlete, it's absolutely what you have to do. You always have to go find and keep learning, but don't throw away everything else you have. Go ahead, Thorfinn.
That can be its own problem, is
Yes.
getting used to throwing away valuable things, thinking.
Yeah, sometimes you do have to.
Next thing.
Yep.
That's actually, I think, another one of these ego things is that as a coach, you have to separate yourself from that and not be afraid to allow your student to learn from someone else, because there's certain things that they can do that you can't do. So you will try and help them understand that. They're not going to understand that. So what they do is that maybe they learn better from this particular person, this skill or this type of fighting style. And really it's about letting go of your own ego and not being afraid of your students learning something. That's huge. My knight was very much about this. He was all about like, hey, he was a really strong guy, and so I had to learn to adapt. I wanted to fight like him, but I couldn't physically do it. He was too much stronger than I was, right? And so I had to learn to, actually generate the power. So he'd say like, maybe you need to work with this guy for a bit, right? Because his ego wasn't about his own success. It was about my success. And so he was totally okay with that. And this is something that as a coach, if you're going to take on this mentor role, guys, you need to separate yourself from that and be okay with your student just being able to learn the way they learn. And if that means that guy over there can teach them that, let them learn that. And then you can still be the coach, but it doesn't break down any of those barriers. As a matter of fact, it strengthens them. I think it makes them actually a stronger connection for you to say, hey, go over there and learn this thing. Right. So I think that is something as coaches, we all should try and keep in the back of our mind is allowing your student to succeed and pointing them in the direction that's going to make that happen. Thanks, guys.
Yeah. And sometimes they actually come home and you have to help them.
Well, sure. Yeah.
What somebody else is showing you. right? Or showing them.
Right.
Sagan, you were going to say something.
Yeah, I mean, we're on to a very important point. And once again, whether it's teacher, coach, or trainer, know your limitations and be willing to admit them, right? If somebody asks you a question, don't just say, I don't know. Say, I don't have an answer for that. I don't fight that weapons form, but I know somebody who does. And you as teacher, coach, trainer, are trying to assist the student trainee in any way you can. It's not all about you. Okay, we need the ego thing has been stressed here, but it's out there. It's not about you. It's about the success on both sides, but mostly on the student trainee side. And if you cannot assist in a specific success, there's no fault in that.
As Sean just popped in the comments, and I've been thinking in the last 10 minutes or so back to his something he said on one of the earlier episodes about how many people ask him, like, Sean, you're such a good trainer. How do I do that? How do I become a trainer like you're doing? I think the first thing to realize is just because you're a good fighter does not mean you are going to make a good trainer. And we've kind of stated that. But then we come back to another thing that he says a lot from the military: embrace the suck. Be ready to be a crappy coach or a crappy instructor and tell people to do the wrong things. You better prepare for it, because you're basically like a newbie teacher. Picture yourself back, when you first time you got an armor, you weren't going out and looking like a rock star. You look like an idiot and probably hit yourself in the head. You're going to do the same thing with teaching. So brace yourself for the fact that although you are kind of a subject matter expert in fighting, because you're probably got some experience, be ready to be clumsy. You will talk too much. You'll flood students with too much information. You'll say things that are confusing. You'll conflict with them. You'll babble. Just be ready for it. But just like learning to fight, you're going to have to trudge through and learn how to do those things. So be ready for that and embrace the suck.
Exactly.
So I had a weird experience, is that I was a person who was like one of those natural fighters. I could go and watch someone do something and just and incorporate it into my fighting style, right? Mm-hmm. And then when people would ask me, how did you do that? And I'm going, well, you just do this and this. You can't do that, right? And I didn't realize there was a lot more going on. This is years ago, guys. And I had a squire brother, Artos Quintus, from now he lives in Caid, who was a very, very good analyst, right? I would say, well, you just do this and this. And he'd go, no, Thorfinn, you do this, 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 and this. I'm like, holy crap, there was 4 things I didn't even know I did, right? And he would say, yeah. And so what he did was he opened me up to actually running the processes through my head. So having someone to bounce ideas off like that was really good for me, because I was one of those people that sucked at doing that, right? And until I had someone point out all of the minutia of the things I did, it changed my perspective on training someone. So I didn't understand. I was like, well, why can't you just do this? Right? I just, duh, that seems the obvious thing. Instead, what it allowed me to do is then break down mentally every step of the process. And I really owe a lot to my training style and instructor's position to this particular squire brother of mine, is that he was like, Thorfinn, you do this. You don't do any of those things you think you do. and having someone turn on that light bulb for me was a big step. And that's a lot about listening. So I was willing to listen to someone, and I mean, I'm a substantially, I think, better fighter than he is, but he was a person who can analyze it and break it down for me. And I'll be honest with you, it was a huge gift he gave me.
Yeah, I think that's a big part. And you see it a lot in boxing, where a lot of the coaches aren't world champions. Some of them never even box. It's not about that. They can bring in people to teach their boxers. They can bring in people to specifically train, like I talked before, it was specifically train, your physical health, your weight control, your nutrition, they have coaches for everything nowadays that are so specialized, they get degrees, right? And then but the coach is there to understand what you need. And he right. can read what he sees. There's in another article I was reading, as a coach, you need to ask yourself, how can I make my student better? How can I prepare them for competition? How can I engage and connect with them? And are they getting better at what I'm helping them with? Right? And so as a coach, those are the things you're concentrating on. It's not about you, right? So in that case, what he's, the good part for him is he could see, and that's a rare gift sometimes. And it's another one of those things you have to learn. And some people it's just hard to see what's happening in fights. And especially when you're doing it yourself.
Yeah, some people never see it.
No.
True. Absolutely true.
And they can be honestly successful and still
Yeah.
and that's a really kind of an interesting place to be, I think, is that they're like, well, I just do an activity, and they can't understand really why or why they're successful. And I can guarantee you, this is what Tristan talked about. This guy's gonna be an awful instructor, right? This person's gonna be a bad teacher because they don't understand. They really don't understand really what they're doing fundamentally. And so the ability to try and like break those things down and see it objectively, is I think a really important.
And
Well,
the
they're
reason
not
to
really
invest in
interested.
that is that
Right,
if
go
you
ahead,
really
Tristan.
want to learn a martial art, you teach it.
Right.
You
There
will
you
be
go.
asked questions like by a 4-year-old that'll challenge your brain to just go, I don't even know how to answer this, but you better find out. You better find out.
Right. What Thorfinn was just talking about too. A lot of those individuals, their only interest is how. I can do it, so I don't care what the who, what, where, when, and why are. I really how. And once they get there, that's it. I mean, for them, it's I can do it.
Yeah.
To a point, I don't care that you can't. Right.
Because it's about them.
Right. And we're back to that point that probably it's a good thing that they don't have no interest in being a teacher, coach, or trainer. Right.
Which is fine too, right?
Absolutely. There is nothing wrong with that at all. And back to Tristan's analogy of the suckage, it's also one of those things on our side where we speak and we speak again and we speak again, and the trainee student goes out and it's still not happening. Right. And it's like, don't immediately put the blame over on that other side. Go, wait a minute, how do I get through to this student right here, this person that I'm in partnership with? How do I get through to them? What's the issue, right? How do I change what I'm saying? Or is it time for, the object lesson of here's how, here's why, here's when, here, and you walk them through trying to get to that success. And after a while, especially in the coach or trainer role, the more time spent with the individual, you'll understand how they learn.
Yes.
You'll understand this one needs more object lessons than that one. This one doesn't need any object lessons at all. All I have to do is show them and it happens. All I have to do is talk to this other one and it happens. But you need to know your limitations. You really do. So.
I think,
just to drop altitude real quick on a bit more tangible, what you described there to me comes out with when people say, how do you come up with drills? Like, where do I find drills and where do I find exercises and ways of working on specific things? When you're really in touch with a student and you see what they're lacking, you will come up with a drill that will address exactly that. So if you're in a mindset where you're gathering, I see footwork problems, I just need footwork drills. You don't see it well enough to go, what exactly type of footwork do we need here? And I'm going to design a drill, or I'll go find one that's pretty close that I can fit that will specifically address that application. And so this is where, how do you make drills, or how do you find drills? Like that's how it comes out, because that student so well, exactly what they need to add.
Thorfinn, you had your
Yeah, go ahead, Thorfinn.
No, I was gonna say I wrote down a note here that just said be open to learning their method of learning.
True.
Right. And this is a huge thing, is that not every student communicates with you in the same way. Right. And so it's, as an instructor and hopefully even beyond that, and mentor, you have to be willing to understand how they learn. And we were talking about it a minute ago, that this guy maybe does this and this one learns, or organically or whatever. It's okay for them to each have their own like conversation with you about how they're learning.
Yes.
And so if you only approach it as, I do it this way, you have to do it this way, there's going to be many communication breakdowns, right? And instead, you could just like kind of be observant. I think is really part of the role of the trainer, not necessarily the instructor teacher, but trainer and then coach, is being cognizant of how this person is learning, and just to be aware. And so that's a big step, is also to just say that this is okay for this person to learn this way. I am not communicating that way. Like who is it that said that I told this guy like 3 different ways. Oh, Sagan, and they didn't understand. But it's okay to find that way. And it may take time.
Yes, it will.
Each student, guys, is an entirely different experience, right?
Yep.
And so there's no metric that you can say every time, do this, then this happens, right? You have to figure out how to get that into their head so that they can convert it into their body and be able to use it.
Right.
When Sagan talked about the where, what, how, why, when thing, and when you said when you teach somebody how to do something, one of the big things I learned as an instructor and mentor is learn about when they learn it. Don't expect that the minute you show somebody something, they're going to click it in right then and there.
Absolutely.
You plant the seed and then wait to see when it grows. And oftentimes, and I had this both with my instructors teaching me within SCA fighting, within Aikido, and I've seen it with students that I've had to have a patience and say, I'm going to plant the seed in you. I'm going to show you how to do something. I don't care if you get it right now, and I'm not going to go off the handle if you don't get it quick enough. Let it germinate in there. And in a week or 2 weeks or a month, it'll click, and suddenly you're just going to go bong, and your body will do what I've just told it and programmed it to do. But it may take a little bit. So patience is one of those things I think.
And there's nothing like seeing the light go on in the eyes of your student.
True story.
They light up and it's like, I get it. And then 5 minutes later, I lost it.
One of the big ones is seeing one of my students do it and then just go, I didn't even think about it. And I said, do you think that I'm actually training you?
True.
I'm training your lizard brain back there. I'm going past all the stuff in your head that's going, I can't do this. I don't know what I'm doing. I can't remember all this other stuff. I'm like, I'm putting that aside and I'm programming right into the central nervous system.
Right. It's one of those deals where for that one moment, they got it mentally and physically. They did. It happened. Right. And then for them, it should happen every single time.
Yeah, no.
Like, no.
Then the brain kicks on and gets in the way and it screws it all up.
Right. It's one of the, it is one of those, cautionary tales, though, that as we've spoken of, all of you have voiced segues into this, is that as the teacher, coach, trainer, be aware and try not to speak or perform over the heads of your students and trainees, right? Make sure when you are presenting information, whether it's physical, i.e., I'll show you how to do this, or it's just in words, this is how this is done. Make sure that when you're looking them in the eye, and if you've got 4 or 5 of them, scan them and look for that one that's looking at you like, no, or they're looking off at the tree, because what you're saying at the moment is not instructional.
Yeah, sometimes you actually have to go back.
There we go. And that again goes to what, Tristan was saying about patience, right? And Thorfinn was saying, well, I don't know. There's 4 things. I do this thing.
And I think on that note, that's a great point. And I think as a good teacher, somebody that's training somebody, try to break down what they're actually doing so they understand it better.
Yes.
Right? Because understanding it from the very beginning is much better to say, okay, here's how you throw that. If you never say, here's how you turn your foot, here's where the energy is coming from, here's how your hand breaks, here's what we're looking for, then you really didn't teach them the whole thing. And they don't have anything to refer back onto to make sure every one of those pieces work up to that shot.
Absolutely.
Yep.
You got to give them the foundation. And that's one big thing, you know, for most people, the thing they really like when I come and teach is that I'll talk about all the pieces. And that way they can understand. And the more they understand, the more they feel like the student, they're like, oh, now I'm getting all of this information. This is great, you know. But it took me a long time to get there. And I think that comes to a couple of pieces in your conversation. And it goes way back to when we're talking about, you know, you got to learn to teach too. And you got to learn to even be a good coach. You know, and the good part is you guys are all, the people that are watching this show and the people that pull it up later, you're obviously interested already because you're here.
Right. That's, you've done the first step.
And for me, what I used to do is I'd go to everybody's classes. I don't necessarily, I may not even agree that style is the best style anymore or whatever, but I go to their classes to learn terminology. I watch how they teach. I watch how they engage their students, and I see what works for them. Because you know what I'm trying to do? I'm trying to be a better teacher. You know, and then sometimes, you know, sometimes I'm too hard on people. And what I try to get out of that, you know, I'll talk after. I'm like, you guys okay with what I said? You know, I know I was a little rough, you know, and I try to get some feedback and stuff like that, because I also want to make sure that I am not overcoaching. I don't want to be that dad on the sideline, you know, like Tristan talked about earlier, right?
There you go.
You know, so, you know, again, I thank everyone that come here because I think they're trying to do something. Maybe they're trying to even be a better fighter because we have some great fight stuff. We have some great, you know, drill and stuff like that, stuff and mentality around fighting. But I think the one thing we really opened the corner up for was to help everybody be better teachers and trainers and hopefully coaches in the end. Sagan?
Yeah, one of the other things, you know, and we've all talked about this before. Brannos, you just talked about it a minute ago, Your Grace, in that you found value immediately in becoming the perpetual student. I go to this class, and this class. Maybe with no specific absolute goal in mind, but out of many of them, you mind a nugget. Hey, you know what? I never saw that setup for that combination, or, so you can do this movement with the shield foot. Oh, I get that, right? And it is one of those things where as we are perpetual students, we can then take that lesson we receive and find that student trainee that we can apply it to and help them. But it's because we are perpetual students that we can and are allowed to do that.
And for teaching and coaching, add a gear to your transmission, and that is the teaching style and the method. And what Brannos said to me rings absolutely 100% true. Whenever I go to a seminar or I watch a senior instructor, and some of these guys have been teaching for 30, 40 years, like I will watch them like a hawk to listen to the language they use, watch how they describe things. One of the most remarkable teachers that I remember seeing was when I visited Tokyo, and I went to the Hambu dojo there and learned. I saw a teacher teach a bunch of people that didn't speak any Japanese. He did it entirely silently with body motions and small cues. It's like, here, look at this. He'd shake his hand a little bit to get your attention. I mean, he had people from Czechoslovakia, US, all over the place. What do you do when you can't even speak the language? Imagine teaching an SCA fighter when you can't speak their language. How are you going to communicate? I'm like, that was a powerful communicator.
Yep.
And, you know, you imagine challenges like that, but try it sometime. Just see what you can do to communicate, but look at how people do communicate. And I love picking up different people's terminology, the language that they use with people, because students, you'll run across all different types that need a certain language that will make something click. And you can bombard them with this and that and the other, and they won't get it. And then you land on the thing that they're like, okay, I understand that. That description makes sense to me. And so it's valuable. That's learning to learn and learning to be a coach. It's its own study. So when you see it, jump on it and steal it, just like you would steal technique or anything else.
Absolutely.
Thorfinn.
So when I was doing jujitsu, I would watch these people that were like very high rank, you know, like 8th or 9th degree or even 10th degree black belt. There was only supposedly a couple of those in the entire United States at the time, right? But what I would watch was that they started to stagnate, and because they had believed that their style or their technique was the end all be all technique. And I watched guys who were lower rank who were still learning, right? Even though they were we're talking 5th degree black belt, right? And that person was still open to the idea that there was more to the martial art, and the other people seemed to be more attached to their experience and their renown through this technique, right? So they were stagnant in a way that they could not learn or move forward anymore. And for me, it was these guys that I would watch that they were still willing to say, no, there's so much more, right? And break through those things. So I strongly recommend as a coach to not become stagnant. So like Brannos says, go to someone else's class, right? Go to that class, learn something, or you know what, even just hear how they say our martial art works, right? It may not be the way that gels with you, but at least you are still open and learning. When we start blocking everything down and locking it down, you're done. And I think that these guys are the people that you see they achieve and then they just kind of stop, right? And there's so much more. We are barely scratching the surface of this martial art right now. And there's so much more to learn. So instead, let's be open, and that's basically what my message was right there. Was let's be open to the idea that there's more to learn, and stop trying to say like it has to be done like this.
Sure.
Right.
There's
Right.
two crucial concepts that I think are just gems that everybody needs to understand. One is most skills are perishable, and martial arts skills are perishable. Just because you were great at something 5 years ago doesn't mean you can still go do it today.
Right.
And the second one is you're either growing or you're dying. You can't just hang in space. So if you stopped going up and growing, you're on the downward slide. And that's learning. That's and you can evolve how you learn, but you should always be pursuing growth, because the other side is not very good. It's not going to a good place.
You are just providing me with more segues tonight than I can ask for.
I know. I'm serving them right over the net.
Right. So one of those things in the martial arts, it's a form, right? Mm-hmm. So Aikido. So you make it to whatever the highest rank is, Nidan, whatever it is, right? Mm-hmm. Now you're at the top. Who's your teacher? Who is now going to pull you, right? Where in our martial art, how many different weapons forms are there? Mm-hmm. Right? We fight from our feet. We fight from our knees. We fight single-handed. We fight two-handed. We fight. So in our martial art, to be the absolute top in all of that, I don't think so. Mm-hmm. But if I think Thorfinn sort of alluded to this, if you are the top in sword and shield, and that's all you deem you ever want to do, well, then as Tristan said, you know what? Your skill set may stagnate. Mm-hmm. Right? Especially on the mental side, because it's one of those things, if nobody's pulling you along anymore, right? And your skill set starts to stagnate a bit, or it doesn't, and you get bored, right? And you're saying, I'm only going to fight sword and board. Well, that will be a limitation of its own. But as we are talking about our martial art, there are so many avenues to be the student and be the trainer that for me, at least, it's been a never-ending cycle. And there's no way, it's like, I will always consider myself the perpetual student, and justifiably so, because in order to do that, I have to be open. I have to be.
So, I'm not to disqualify it, because we were 100% right that we have so many options, and it's like the SCA. You come in to do one hobby, you end up doing 50, but that same piece is no different in fighting. The good part about what we have is we have a high level of constant competition. And as we see, there is no one that's ever the best at anything. And if you do, like Thorfinn says, think you are, then,
Wow.
then the next piece is the next guy is going to knock you down. And we see this in boxing all the time too. We see the guys that get to the top. They want to get a couple of matches down so they can hold the title for a bit. They have matches they have to take. But then they go for the big money matches. And sometimes, they're just not ready. Mentally, they're not ready. And that's what a coach is there, is mentally to keep a person stimulated and in the game. Some people can do that to themselves. I've had a lot of years of fighting one style, in fact, right? And not that I can't fight other styles, because fundamentally range and all the things we do and manipulating people is fundamental to almost any weapon you have. But some point you get to that place where you think you're done, then you probably are done. When you think, okay, I'm here at this place, where am I going next? Man, look what that guy's doing. I am going to go learn that. I'm right now during COVID, when you can't do nothing, I realized how crap, and everybody thinks I have great feet, how crap my feet have been for 30 years. I know more about feet from the last year of COVID than I ever thought I would. And I'm sure I still have more learning to do there. And so, so be careful. Be careful how, that you think you made it somewhere, because I can guarantee you that you didn't. And if you do, that guy right underneath you will show you didn't.
Absolutely.
And we see that in our sport. We see how styles have developed because we're a super young sport. You can see that probably in Aikido. You have some older Aikido styles that probably really don't compete as well now. With mentally, it may be the same underlining form, but because they've taken it a little bit more soft, in other words, they've turned it into format more. Somebody that's in a school that's a little bit more physical, they may actually have a style that may teach you something. So there's always a place to look. And if that's, hey, I'm going to shorten my shield, I'm going to, I'm going to fight polearm, I'm going to fight two sword. Hopefully nobody says they're going to fight Madhu, but it's that kind of it's that kind of thing. It's just a joke, guys out there.
Come on now.
Was it though? I'm pretty sure it wasn't a joke. But also, you're right.
But so that's that perpetual learning, and that's I've been lucky enough, even when I'm like, okay, I'm a little, I'm searching, I'm still trying to perfect other stuff, but I'm like searching for that next thing, and I'm just not motivated to dig in and maybe watch as many videos, and I can't go out and see people and talk with people and say, man, that was beautiful. What are you doing inside that? Where's your mind coming from on that? What kind of things do you practice? So, then I look, and I got lucky enough to have this, where now I have to go out and I got to read up on what a coach is and how to train. And Tristan tells me all the stuff that he does, and Sagan's making me look stupid. And, it's all of those things, Jesus, but it's great because I could still learn. And I'm hoping that's what everybody out there is really looking at.
There we go. Next.
All right. So I guess, first I'm going to throw out there, is there any questions out there? I'm going to, a couple of people, there was a couple of things brought up, or at least one thing that brought up, for those that have done coaching, Sagan, Tristan, Thorfinn, all you guys have done some type of coaching with somebody. Mm-hmm. Somebody is close to you. These guys are like, they come out to the field, they need their, they need a head adjustment, not a physical adjustment, but a head adjustment. You're like, hey, go out there, put this pressure here, put that pressure there. And you had to, it's not that they're not doing it, it's just their head's not in the game, right? They're just not thinking of these things. And as soon as you get their mind going, and then they're in the fight again mentally, And that was your job, to get them back in the fight. That's a kind of thing a coach does. And, how, I guess, how do you recognize or learn to do those kinds of things? I mean, is it just, are you using anything like, for some of my people I'm like, okay, you're going to give me a book and you're going to write down everything you do at practice, and then we're going to review it every week. And I want not only physical stuff you're having trouble with, but I want to know mentally how you felt. If you're frustrated, if you're pissed off at me, if you're pissed off at yourself, right? Because
you're injured.
Yeah, and because I find that, I use that as a way to say, okay, you felt like I thought you got the style, and you're like, oh yeah, I sucked. I couldn't do that technique. And I'm like, I swear you just did it like a dozen times. But if they don't think they did it, did they really learn it? Right? So I really use a notebook to help on those things. And like one of the big things I do in my notebook is I want 3 things you thought you did right at practice and 3 things that you thought you could do better. Only 3, right? And I tell you where I got that was Rongvalder was going through a tough period where he's just, typical top end fighter guys, including all of us. It's like, I suck. You could be beating everybody up, but I suck. Because I got hit once, or my feet weren't the way they were supposed to be and the way I know they're supposed to be, or my balance is a little forward. I can't move right now. I was terrible. And he got caught in this negative for a while. And it literally at one point, I was like at the end of practice, because I'm asking him and I'm getting all this negative, and I'm like, I want you to do a favor. Next practice, you're going to give me 3 things you did right. Right? To try to move it to a positive. So that's how I use the book now, right? And that's, do you guys have anything specifically you use, like that you could help? Anything. I mean, it doesn't matter. It's like anything you could help somebody else with. In other words, anywhere you can help them be a better coach or even trainer.
We're back to one of those spots where we could do an hour on just that.
Well, and we got a few questions, so we could take those first if you want.
It's one of those things, though, again, put the student before yourself and help them as best you can. It is one of those things that you are not going to be the do-all, be-all, end-all of coaching, training, and teaching. Absolutely. And you, as you say, it's interesting that you brought up the journaling. I just launched 2 people on their quest with journals being the first thing that they had to produce. And, that will present the opportunity for me to teach, coach, train them into the use of a journal in working with me, as well as teaching them that same thing on how to make the entries valuable to them. But there are those times where, again, as we've addressed, each student presents something unique, particular, common. But, it is in how we deal with them. When I was coaching, okay, so here's how I looked at coaching. I would show up at practice, and one of 2 things would happen. Somebody would come to me, or I would go to them. In that coach mode, I noticed on the field that they were having a foot problem in this one instance of a combination of blow, a defense, and I would go to them and coach them on that one thing. Sometimes they would come to me and say, can you watch me do this? Same thing, right? It's that personalization of teacher, coach, trainer, right? That the intent is there, absolutely. There is something there where they agree to listen to you, they agree to partner with you, and you help them as best you can. Once you're in that, the 2 roles, teacher, student, trainee, trainer, come into play, and you push those as far as you think it's valuable and successful for the other side. So there are many things. Sometimes it was I have this drill. Let's, if you can be here next week, let's go through the drill. Again, applying whatever pieces, parts I could for the success of the student trainee. And Tristan, what have you got from, not only from the SCA, but from Ike?
Really, the tool is to partially gauge your students' appetite, and they range quite a difference.
Mhm.
When I started Aikido, I tried journaling for the first time ever, and I logged everything I did, everything I could remember from every class. And what I found was that my appetite for learning was huge. But it gave me a mindset of, on the way home, I was driving in the car. I wasn't just jamming the radio or thinking what I was going to do the next day. I was thinking, what just happened at class? What was I doing? What was being taught? Because then when I got home, I could write it down, but I had to keep it in my brain fresh. And it was more of a mental exercise. And I realized not a lot of people have got that level of appetite. But it differs. It's so different from student to student of what they learn, what their level of appetite is, what their ambition is, what their interest is, all that stuff. Really, the tools are, and I guess this comes down to just the baseline fundamental of sharing the passion of what it is they want to do there and being excited about it. I had a lot of people come to me just like, Tristan, you're so excited about fighting. I like being around because you love this so much that I want to get a little of that contagious joy. And I take on Aikido the same way. Like there's not enough hours in the day for me to learn everything there is to learn. But I'm going to chew it up when I'm on the mat. I'm going to try to get as much as I possibly can. And that is contagious. And this kind of addresses one of the questions we had come in about how do you get student retention and new person retention? Let your joy and passion for this be contagious. It's easy to think as you're a coach or a teacher, you start thinking like an academic and you start thinking, I need to transfer information. Well, I'll tell you, information transfer alone is not going to make somebody go, I can't wait to go back there.
Yep.
It's going to be, I want you to be good. You pour your passion through what you know into them and say, come back next week. I'm going to make you even better. I'm going to make you walk out of here today doing something you couldn't do when you showed up. And I want you excited about that. I'm excited to see you do that. That is what will help them want to go experience that again, in my opinion.
No, 100% works for me all the time.
Yeah. So I'm glad we got to that. I'm glad. Thank you for that question. The person that posted it. We're getting a lot of comments, so it kind of zoomed by, but
that's okay.
I didn't want to pass it up.
Yep. No, Thorfinn's going to hit one up too here.
Mm-hmm.
There we go.
Okay. So we have a question out there that says, give me 1 second to roll back. When do you send a student to another coach and then use that coach's observations to help train the student? I think that you'll find as a coach when you are having a disconnect, right, with your student, and what you'll be doing is you'll be talking to them about any technique that you're trying to get them to learn, and then there's a miscommunication maybe that you, as you say, like, maybe you stand like this or whatever. They're not grokking that, and then what you can do is then if you know that there's another instructor over here or a coach that you can say, hey, why don't you go sit with this guy for a while who does these particular activities really well, and then maybe that person can then communicate with them in a way that will make more sense to them. And I think that the big thing is that again, that allowing your student to incorporate techniques into their style that are not necessarily the ones that you learned is okay, right? As long as that they can, as long as their progress is going forward, that's the thing we're trying to do. It's not about you. It's not about this technique that you used to do that was so successful, right? It's about that student having this moment where they can then learn from someone who can tell them to adapt something into their fighting to make them successful. And so I think that as long as, the two of you have an open communication about what your expectations are, you can then allow them to go and do this kind of whenever. Like, point them as a coach. It's really important to point them at the skill set they can learn. So say, like, this guy over here does this, bam, go learn that thing. This person does this, bam, go learn that thing. right? And so I have no problem with the idea that, again, this, because it doesn't reflect on me, right? My experience is not what we're talking about, it's my students' experience. And so allowing them to explore communication styles that work with their learning method. This is a huge part of this, guys, is be open to your students' learning method. And part of that may not be how you communicate. And that is absolutely fine, right? Allow them to explore things, and then when they come back to you, you can then, work together on those, what's incorporating into their style. But at the same time, allow them to explore just every technique of fighting. There's so many, and it's okay. Because some of the things you do, like, again, I use this reference all the time, is my knight was a big guy, strong guy, right? And he could just do things that were ridiculously easy. Like he could just, I watched him take a nail and just punch it in one swing, flat, right? I couldn't do that, right? And so I had to learn to manipulate my body in a different manner. And allowing that to be the case is totally cool. And having someone who's lets you do that, even better. My knight was a guy who was like, go over there, learn from that guy. He's going to teach you how to do this thing, right? And then we can then make you a better fighter. So
All right, so we're gonna. I'm just gonna, and this kind of jumps. I'm gonna finish the other two questions. Actually, one of them was answered real well by Sean in the comments, and that is, how do you embrace the suck? And I think a lot of that comes down to, like Sean says, set your victory conditions, and body count isn't that, and and that goes for coaching too. If maybe one person doesn't understand how you're teaching right now, but somebody else does, or you see somebody throw a shot that you taught them right, that's a victory, right? Even if the guy loses the fight, that's still a victory because that's a step. So take that in mind. Number 3, I think really, Thorfinn, you covered a lot of this, and this is by Soren from the West. How do you help a student that just can't understand what you're teaching? And that's difficult sometimes. 2 things. I see this in a lot of actually really good fighters have that, and sometimes really high-end coaches even get this, or teachers, is they talk at a level that person can't understand yet. And so a lot of times what I'll do is I'll grab one of my other students that I can see that understands what's going on, and I can see them doing the things, and I bring them over to explain to this person, because they explain it in a way sometimes that's a lot more fundamental than how you're explaining it. There's people, I go, this is one of my biggest problems sometimes, and I'll go and I'll be talking to knights in lots of different kingdoms, and after about 10 minutes, they're like, I'm done. I got way too much shit to think about now. I am filled up to here. Thank you very much.
Yep.
And what's happening is I'm so detailed in how something actually develops, and throwing stuff out that they may have not ever thought about, that they're like, how can that be? And they're still thinking about that, and I'm still throwing shit out at them. So, at this point, they're like trying to juggle this knowledge that's being thrown at them, and they're like, okay, I'm done. So sometimes by bringing somebody in that gets directly to the point, and that person's like, oh, I get that, and then you can explain around the point. And this is Tristan, you spoke to this earlier about prepping somebody before you actually do it, and I do that a lot. I'd be like, okay, and we're doing all this today. Oh, and by the way, look at this piece. This is how this works in. We'll cover that later, and then I go on. So now I made nothing out of this little tiny teaching piece that could actually be very complex, but now they're when I bring it up next week, they've already had a chance to not be surprised. Right. So they're like, oh, this is the thing he brought up last week. So they're receptive instead of, oh, he's going to bring up something else. I already have too much shit to learn. Right. So keep that in mind. All right. Thorfinn, you're going to say something, and we're at the 1 minute mark, but and then we'll wrap it up after you talk, and everybody can give a little bit of what they want. And hopefully we had a great episode for you guys.
So to help you guys out there, that when someone does just vomit out a billion bits of information, you understand, I really, I tried to do this, and I was instructed to do this by the people who were my coaches and trainers, was to take one of those things
Yes.
every week. Okay. So we can then, what happens is when Brannos vomits out a million things that you need to do, what you need to do is just focus on one. Grab that thing and just incorporate that into yourself. Okay. This week, we're doing this. Next week, I'm going to grab another one of those things, right? Next week, another, because we're talking about building a foundation. So all of these things that I find that we're going to talk about probably over the next year or infinity is that building a strong foundation of skills and these fundamental skills will pay out so many dividends at the end of your fighting career. These allow you to extrapolate out different styles and fighting and then to everything. So take one thing at a time, guys. Just one little piece, snap it, and then put it into your pocket and then work on that. If we say 50 things, you're just going to be brain is going to explode. Instead, take one thing. Next week we add another. Okay. So it's baby steps. All of this is baby steps to success. And thanks, guys. I really appreciate you all letting me talk.
Sagan, you got some?
Well, I always have something, right? So we're wrapping up. Number one thing, be positive. Number two, be the good student, be the good teacher, coach, and trainer. Okay, taking the success of the student and the trainee as best you can when you are speaking, when you are performing a physical act, so they get the benefit of what you're doing. And after each one of those, ask, do you understand what's going on here? Are my instructions clear? Right? Being realistic is always in everything we do. And I would say that, training from both sides is a journey. And it's one of those things where, sometimes there are no absolutes, right? I can't say when I will be able to train you to do this. I can't say when you will be a crown competitor, but it's the journey that makes it worth it.
Tristan.
Well, just to kind of wrap up, I guess this episode was identifying the differences between a coach, a trainer, and a teacher or an instructor, and hopefully we conveyed that pretty well. And I think here's where we're going to bridge into the next episode, which is next Friday. We're going to talk a little bit more and a little less abstract and more into the getting down and dirty with the good, the bad, and the ugly of how to be a good coach, trainer, and instructor or teacher, do's and don'ts of putting these abstract concepts we've been talking about into application. And I'm really hoping people will bring some stories. I've got some ones to share of, mistakes that I've made. And I think everybody's going to make more mistakes than they'll come away with, I've got this great success, because that's how successful people get there. They make a lot of mistakes. And so I'm looking forward to the next episode. I was really looking forward to tonight. I think this is kind of an episode that we should have done a long time ago to cover, because that's really part of what this whole coaching thing is. Identify exactly what we're doing, and now let's focus on how to do it with doing very few mistakes, if any. So this is going to be a great trilogy.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Look forward to hearing and listening to next week's episode, and hopefully everybody had a good night and enjoyed the presentation, and are looking forward to next week. Please, if you want to hear other stuff, or maybe want something broken out farther, let us know. We got a lot of feedback from last week's episode, the Elephant in the Room episode. So we're probably gonna do another kind of show on that and dive in a little bit more. But that's what we're here for. Just really, we want to help everybody get more educated about what we do, because the more educated we are, the better everybody is, right? And that's the way we share as a community, and that's the best part. I feel like I'm getting just as much back from these shows as anyone else, and it's truly been amazing and opened up my SCA experience that much more. So. And it's nice just being able to share like everybody enjoys. And I sure thank everybody for the questions, and the comments are still. Sometimes I'd rather be in the comment area than on the show because I don't get to answer as much. But it's all good. And once again, I have to extend a huge, wonderful thank you to Vesper, who's caught in her house when it's all snowy and icy, and she's stuck with us.
Oh, that's got to be awful, snow and ice.
No, I think the awful is being stuck with us.
That's true.
There's no better company than to be stuck with you.
Wow, that sounded. Yeah, that's what that sounded like.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you all for tonight. It's wonderful seeing everybody, and we are back again next Friday.
Yep.
So until then, I hope everybody has a safe and healthy and wonderful week.
Yep. Everybody have a great weekend. Stay safe.
Yep. Thanks,
Vesper,
everyone.
stay warm.
Keep rocking on your hearts.
Always keep learning.
Thanks, guys.
Absolutely.
Good night.
Yep.